Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Daily Defender. Great to be with everybody again. Glad you're with us and spending some time with us, and glad that we can be with all of you, giving you another video and some other hopefully great and informative content. First of all, the admin usually really appreciate everybody. We got more subscribers this week, so really appreciate that. Please continue if you're new to the channel or coming back to the channel. Please hit the subscribe button. We're not to where we need to be yet goal-wise, or at least my personal goals, so could really use your help there. Great comments earlier in the week, late last week. I'm losing track of time. Really, again, enjoyed interacting with everybody, and hopefully we can do that again on this one. So please like and hit the subscribe button and comment. Usual disclaimer, my face is blurred because of my day job, and I want to express my views and my content on my channel. So with that out of the way, what we want to do today is build off of the last video that I had put out. And of course, that was kind of a fairly quick summary of what we want to do next with these next series of videos. And it's all going to be centered around Smith and Wesson snub nose. And that's a broad category for Smith and Wesson if you think about it. It's a broad category in general, right? Just snub nose in general, and we'll talk a little bit about that and maybe a definition of that, so to speak. But this snub nose revolver topic within Smith and Wesson is a really broad one, basically because like a lot of their models, the years of production and the number of variants that they have put out over those years of production. And it's pretty amazing, actually, when you look at that. And again, just what Smith and Wesson originally wanted to do, and what they eventually accomplished with this snub nose. And so we're gonna break it down, like I mentioned in the initial video. I think the only way to really do this is grab a few key models, and we'll do that. And I think it's logical to start with the Chief Special, because that's obviously where it all begins. And we have a number of firearms here on the table. They're all unloaded, obviously, so we've got a clear, safe firearm to work with. But as I just mentioned, this is going to be the primary piece in our video when we get into the deep dive, and it is a model 36 Chief Special, and it is a 36, no dash, and so it is basically an early 1960s version. And again, I know from the distance of the camera that's difficult for you guys to pick up a little bit and pick up on the flat latch and so forth, but we'll do all that in the deep dive. But this model 36 Chief Special, of course, it starts out as the Chief Special in 1950. And we'll really kind of get into the history a little bit in the deep dive, so we can do all that. But this model comes out in 1950 as the Chief Special. And as I alluded to in the other video, the snub nose intro video, if you will, that Smith and Wesson was aware of what Colt was doing. Colt had the Detective Special in 38 Special, and Smith and Wesson did not. Colt brought that particular firearm to production in about 1927. And so they were way ahead of the game of Smith & Wesson. Smith & Wesson was sticking with their I-frames, again, safe and clear firearm, like this Regulation Police, this 5-shot I-frame that we've talked about before, and we've got a video on this, but we'll use it as a comparison in the deep dive. And they were really sticking with these firearms in the 32 Smith & Wesson cartridge and the 38 Smith & Wesson cartridge. They had not really migrated to a small particular pistol. They had 38 Special around 1897, 1899. I'll have to look that up. So they had the cartridge, but they had not enabled it into this small package. And they were basically still using, if I remember right, the Model 10 maybe. And so that's kind of where Smith and Wesson was living with these small revolvers. They were in this 32 Smith & Wesson, they were in the 38 Smith & Wesson, but they were in the I-frames, generally speaking, and they didn't have this kind of small frame package that was at least similar to the Colt Detective Special. The Colt Detective Special is a slightly larger frame than the J-frame, and it's a 6-shot. And, you know, and again, just kind of bringing that over. This is a 2-inch. Maybe just getting into the snub nose definition, if you will, for a minute. You know, this is again, a clear and safe firearm. This is a 6-shot 38 special. This is a 15-2. I have a much larger grip on here, stock, than you normally would have, just because I enjoy that a little bit better for range use. It's certainly it's one of these oversized target grips, and it does take away from the kind of the smaller size of this K-frame, this 2-inch K-frame. But it's just a joy to shoot at the range. I love the grip that I put on there, and we'll do a video on this one too. This is a really sweet firearm, this 15-2. But digressing a little bit, so I think, you know, the snub nose definition obviously generally is 2 to 3 inch. I personally tend to think of it as a 2-inch, but I don't think of it as the larger K-frame, and I don't think most people do. I think most people, when they think snub nose revolver, they are, to maybe Smith and Wesson's credit, they are thinking of a Chief Special or the Model 36. I think when people think snub nose revolver, this is really where they're going to. Of course, unless you're a diehard Colt fan, or Ruger, or Rossi, or Taurus, or something like that. But even just, I think the masses generally gravitate with a visual image almost of the Chief Specials. So, you know, we've got that, and that's again going to be the crux of this video. But I just want to talk a little bit here in the intro on that definition, and I'll speak more to it in the deep dive. And I guess the other thing we need to talk about, I don't know if we do it here or in the deep dive again, but you know, just the kind of the functionality of these firearms, or how they're used, or how they're viewed today. You know, do people still carry them? Are they still viable? Who are they really geared towards or best suited for? I think that has to be part of this discussion that we have with snub nose revolvers, because there's this, you know, it's light and easy to carry, and it's small, and so maybe it should be, you know, someone's first firearm. I personally disagree with that. Others might state that it's just kind of, you know, a 5-shot 38. There's no purpose to it. There's no need for it. Again, I disagree with that. And but maybe we'll save kind of those discussions for the deep dive, so we can be talking about the pistol or the revolver at the same time that we kind of get into some of those topics. So that's really what we want to accomplish today. I did allude to the fact in the snub nose introduction video, I guess, again, this is kind of what we're calling it, the last one, that I had maybe had an opportunity to get another small J-frame revolver onto the channel, and I was able to do that. This is going to be a Model 60. So this is the all stainless steel version of the Chief Special. And this is kind of a treat to talk about too, and another amazing little piece of Smith and Wesson history due to the first stainless steel revolver ever made. So that'll be fun to talk about. But again, for the purpose of the intro, just kind of compartmentalizing this a little bit, building off of that initial snub nose kind of intro video that I had mentioned, and that we will start with the deep dive on the Chief Special Model 36. So again, without prolonging our intro, let's go ahead to the deep dive. Right, so as we just introed, we want to do our deep dive on this Chief Special. And before we do that, again, I think we need to just recover the history part of it, just so we kind of understand what our jumping off point is for Smith and Wesson. So as I kind of alluded to, Smith and Wesson was very cognizant of what, you know, Colt was doing. Colt had their detective special out since 1927 in 38 special as a 6-shot. And it was a kind of a small to medium size frame. Basically, Smith and Wesson at that time was still working with their I-frame. And of course, we have one of those here. We've got a safe and a clear firearm with our regulation police. And this is what Smith and Wesson would have been generally working with at that time with their 38 Smith and Wesson and .32 Smith and Wesson calibers in this small I-frame. This was their kind of their primary platform. Now they did have a .38 Special. They actually brought out the .38 Special as a cartridge in 1899, but it seemed to be relegated or situated with the military police, the M&P at that time, which eventually would become the Model 10. But it was a slightly larger frame. It was actually on the K-frame, if I remember correctly. And so it probably harked back kind of similar to something like this 15. And again, we've got another clear and safe firearm, but this is a 6-shot .38 Special, and it's a K-frame, and minus the large oversized target grip, even if, or stock, even if we kind of take that out of the equation, you know, we can see that's a considerably larger frame than what they ultimately developed with the J-frame. But the Colt Detective Special was kind of in between these two, and because again, it was a 6-shot, it had to be a little bit larger. But so Smith and Wesson, you know, in 1950, the president at that time decided that, you know, tasked his engineering and product management team to come up with a 6-shot .38 Special in a smaller, more concealable package. And so they obviously realized quickly that they can't do that with the I-frame. And again, the M&P is too large. So they developed this J-frame. And around that fall of 1950, and again, another clear and safe firearm, fall of 1950, Smith and Wesson attends the International Association of the Chief of Police. And they present this, and there's either some kind of contest or a naming of the firearm, and they come to this Chief Special, which just sticks, and of course, Smith and Wesson uses that. And keep in mind, this is 1950. Smith and Wesson doesn't move to actual model numbers until 1957, at which point this becomes the 36, Model 36. The Chief Special name, interestingly enough, still attaches to it, stays with it. And even today, I find it interesting that it's probably one of the few model names that has stuck with the firearm through all of these decades, 70 years plus, right? The Chief Special, you still hear people talk about that, still hear people use that term. You know, Combat Masterpiece kind of has dropped off, or Distinguished Combat Masterpiece, or, you know, all these different terms. They've kind of dropped off, but not that Chief Special. And so that's really kind of the jumping off point and why and how Smith and Wesson brings this firearm to market. They needed something in .38 Special in a smaller, more concealable package, and they come up with this J-frame. And so that's what we have here. And I guess we can kind of roll into the deep dive here on this particular model. Now the Chief Specials, or the 36s, were produced from, like I said, 1950 as continuous production all the way to about 1999 or 2000. Between 2000 and 2007, they really just do specials. They don't actually have this as a standard production model, as I understand it. But then in 2007, the Classic series is reintroduced in the Classic series. And in fact, if we grab one of our 2007 trusty product catalogs from Smith and Wesson, 2007, and we open that up, there it is. We've got a Model 36 that is clearly in the Classic line, along with their other classic revolvers that they've moved through here. And, interestingly enough, there's the Model 40 Centennial with the grip safety, and we'll talk about one of those in a video. But there it is. It's reintroduced in 2007. Still, obviously, as a Model 36, but in this Classic series, and it stays there today. I personally don't see a lot of these in gun shops. I see a lot of 5-shot Smith and Wesson .38 Specials, but more like a 4.42, something with the hammerless design. But at any rate, it's still made today, which I think is pretty neat. So Anyways, getting into the deep dive of this particular firearm, like I said, these were made from 1950 to 1999. This is a Model 36. It's just a straight 36. It's not a dash. And based on the serial number, I know this puts it around 1962 or 1963. And as we kind of, like I said, just do our normal walk around, we have a steel frame, a blued firearm, obviously. And I've already mentioned it's on this J frame. We have a round butt with our stocks, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's the 5-shot. We've already mentioned that. And we have a 2-inch pinned barrel. Smith and Wesson obviously is still pinning barrels at this point in the 60s and 70s, right? And we have on this side, we've got the traditional Smith and Wesson logo, trademark kind of stamp, and it says Smith and Wesson up here on this side. If we turn the firearm over, we've got the traditional Smith and Wesson information here, made in the U.S., etc. And then on the barrel up here, we have 38 S&W SPL. So maybe not the first time, because again, the military police would have had a 38 special, but for the first time in a small compact package, we have 38 Smith and Wesson special noted, roll stamped or stamped into the barrel, which is pretty cool. The 36 Chief Special obviously is a hammer design. It has the at this point, the still very classic nose hammer or nose portion to the hammer. And again, a full hammer. We have this flat latch, which is also kind of interesting. The flat latch was utilized up until about 66, I think it was, 66 or 67. And so this certainly falls in correct, with this production model of around 62 or 63. So we have that. We have these very, very nice wood stocks. These are walnut. They're original to this particular firearm. We've got the diamond pattern with the checkering, and they're just in very, very nice shape, in my opinion. Just thankfully on this particular firearm, they've just been well taken care of, and it's always nice to see really, really nice wood stocks on these Smith and Wessons, especially when they're original. And then the serial number is stamped down here into the bottom of the frame. What else can I tell you about it? It's due to the J frame, the ejector. You've got a pretty small, path of ejection, right? This would probably be a little challenging to extract spent casings or cartridges in a stressful or combat situation. But that is kind of, it is what it is with these small J frames or any of the small frame Smith and Wesson revolvers. Overall condition of this one, I think, is pretty decent. It's not collector's grade by any stretch. The frame is actually in very good condition, as is the bluing. There's very little holster wear at all through this. The bluing still has that great dark midnight blue color that I just love, and Smith and Wesson is kind of famous for. I love that bluing. It's almost intoxicating, the color. There's a little bit of wear up here on the right side, which isn't bad at all. And then on the cylinder, there's a few marring or there's no depth to it. There's no pitting. It's really just almost like I'm not going to say imperfection, but a marring of the finish. It's smooth. You can't feel anything. And then other parts of the cylinder seem very, very good. So it's not down into the metal or anything like that. So overall, the condition is quite good. I bought this not too long ago. And then I guess the next part of this firearm that we need to talk about is the sights. And because this is where it starts to get into some of the I guess, negative, or where people start to talk about the difficulty of shooting these and all of that. So let's go ahead and talk about the sights. The firearm has this kind of trench style through here. Hopefully you can see that. I know lighting's not perfect. That's not bad there. And then it kind of gets to this half moon or U shape in the back. And sorry, kind of get that there. And then we have, of course, a completely fixed front sight. It's ramped, serrated, I guess, if you will. And again, if we can kind of get this angle right, that's, no, I'm having trouble there today. Yep, there we go. That's going to be kind of your sight picture, right? Not a lot to work with. There's no 3 dots. There's no white outline or anything like that. And of course, that gets into kind of the next part about these snub nose revolvers. And maybe even before we go there, just the term snub nose, right? Maybe defining that. Generally, I think most people consider snub nose revolvers in the 2 to 3 inch range, or maybe technically in the 2 to 3 inch range. I think most people, certainly myself included, I tend to think of snub nose at 2 inch. And my brain, and I think the masses, I think most people kind of think of this J-frame style frame to be a snub nose revolver. And in fact, visually, I think a lot of people probably go to this image of this Chief Special when you're thinking about a snub nose. But I think that by definition, it's the 2 to 3 inch range. But I think most people consider the 2 inch to be the classic snub nose. But back to the sights. So yeah, this is where this starts to get a little interesting with this firearm, and I think it kind of allows us to move on to the next part of what we want to talk about with these firearms, with what they were originally intended to do or for, and what their kind of new function, or how they're being used today, I guess, if you will. If we go back to the 50s and 60s and 70s, it was definitely geared towards law enforcement, most likely detectives. And then, of course, you started to have some civilian interest in these from a small, compact 5-shot revolver. But generally in that era, it was probably most associated with detectives and so forth. And there's always this connotation about these sights and the firearm not being accurate and difficult to shoot at distance. I don't think it's not the firearm. The firearm is accurate. I do agree with the fact that just the sighting system and the way it's set up on this firearm does not lend itself to shooting at distance well. I'm not saying that people can't do that. We obviously know people who can and shoot well at longer distances. But I think if we kind of boil it down to what this firearm is being used for today, this is a close-up, 3, 5, 7, 10-yard kind of firearm. That's really where this is going to work. I am familiar with firearms. I shoot revolvers a lot. I'm familiar with revolvers. This style firearm does not bother me, and I enjoy them. But I do, we do hear a lot of chatter about, maybe this is a good first firearm, or maybe in the past people thought it was a good firearm for first-time buyers, or maybe females. I really don't want to get into the gender thing because I just don't think it's fair. You can certainly have weak-hand males and small-hand males and inexperienced male shooters, etc. So the gender thing, I think, is irrelevant. But they are difficult to shoot if you are not familiar with firearms and familiar with revolvers and shooting small packages like this with relatively simple sights. So I am of the camp. I agree that this is not a good firearm for first-time buyers. And of course, we can kind of expand that discussion into, is this, really, even with all of the options that are out there today, would this be your first go-to firearm given everything that is out there? And I think the honest answer is no, right? You've got the P365 from SIG. You've got, Glock 19s and small Glocks and all this stuff, right? And my point is, if you're truly looking at this on a sheet of paper from a common sense standpoint of capacity and 3-dot sights and night sights, etc., there are, if you only had one firearm or we're going to use it as a primary firearm, you probably do have better options. Now, having said all of that, this still has a place, and it has a very good place for what it is designed to do. For me, how I engage with this firearm and utilize it, it's kind of a last-ditch effort for me. Certainly, it's been used as backup guns for a long time in ankle holsters, again, kind of harking back to the law enforcement side of things. But I think in today's environment, this is just for me, again, it's a go-to firearm if I don't have my primary firearm with me. Maybe it's just walking the dog late at night, or again, for whatever reason, I don't have my primary firearm on me, and someone walks up to the house, or there's somebody in a driveway, or something like that. At least you can kind of grab this, throw it in a pocket, and have 5 shots of 38 special, probably 38 plus P, and have some, a decent level of self-defense, knowing with what you've got, what you're dealing with, and what your skill level is. So that's kind of my take on these firearms. They're still very relevant today. I would probably challenge anybody to walk into just about any gun shop, and there's going to be a 5-shot or 6-shot revolver, but probably a small Smith and Wesson J-frame 5-shot 38 special in that case. And that's why Smith and Wesson continues to make them today. It is a very small, convenient package, and I think very effective if you understand what your skill and limitations are, and what the limitations are of the firearm. And of course, there's a reliability factor. We have a revolver, right? We can talk about automatics and the capacity and all of that. But again, depending on our shooter and skill level, you can start to also argue simplicity, reliability, hand strength might come into it, again, regardless of gender. So that revolver still has a place, and it certainly has a place for me. I mean, I really love these firearms. I don't know, something about these. I don't know if it's the connection back to law enforcement, or the kind of the detective era in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It's a very visually appealing firearm to me. The shape, I think, is now iconic. To Smith and Wesson's credit, they've created this, and it's just carried through the test of time, 70 plus years. And also, if we think about it, we didn't really touch on just how broad this line is within Smith and Wesson, minus that they've been making it since the 1950s, pretty much continuously in some form or fashion. But, just the fact that the calibers that this size has been utilized in are primarily 38 special, right? But snub nose all the way down to 22, but then 32 Smith and Wesson, 38 Smith and Wesson. I think there was a 32 H&R Magnum, and then these actually graduate up to 357 Magnum, and I believe all the way up to 44 Special, but I'll double check that. And I think the general consensus is that, shooting something like this in a new frame, it would be a stainless steel frame, probably 357 Magnum and a small J frame. Those are actually J Magnum frames, but it's not much bigger. Probably not the most pleasant thing to shoot. I think most people probably relegate that to 38 plus P, almost not unlike how the FBI used revolvers back in the day, right? They were issued the Model 13 and 357 Magnum, but most agents didn't carry 357 Magnum. They carried 38 plus P. So, but still a very just viable, and again, this large production range of models, but not only caliber, but also material of construction, variations. We alluded to that a little bit in my initial snub nose video, where we have completely hammerless designs, hammerless with the grip safety, like I just showed you in the catalog, the bodyguard version, where we have kind of a shrouded hammer, all of these variations in materials of construction. In typical Smith & Wesson, right? Smith & Wesson in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s they had no problem building all of these and making, from a production standpoint, all these variations. And of course, if you had a police department that wanted something this way or that way or stamped, it seemed like they had no issue with that, which I always is pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty hard to do that in manufacturing today, but this is it's just this wide range, this 70-year existence of the Chief Special and this Model 36 and all of its variations. I just think is really cool, and I find them fun. But again, I have a fairly good level of experience with firearms and revolvers in general. And again, this is not for an experienced shooter. Again, I think that's that's another real niche for this firearm is. If you have an experienced shooter and they're experienced in maybe revolvers and DASA or just experienced shooters in general, and then someone's looking for this small J-frame package in 38 Special, I think that's the appeal to these. But again, you can't negate the fact of the very, very simple sight system, and that is a challenge for inexperienced shooters. We've got a story in our family with a police detective in a large city that had one of these as probably in the 50s or 60s or 70s. I don't remember the exact time frame of the story, but the story basically goes that he was on one side of the alley and the perp was on the other side of the alley, and they both had 5-shot revolvers, and they get into a gunfight and each side shoots 5 rounds. Nobody hits anybody or really anything, and the two parties go their separate ways, right? And just kind of a classic scenario, and probably in the 50s or 60s. And again, in an alley in this particular city that I'm referring to, you could have some distance. So this was not a close-up gunfight. If it was two ends of the alley and they both expelled their 5-shot and didn't hit anything, the story goes that they just kind of both went their separate ways, but just kind of an interesting story. So I think that's really the main points that I wanted to cover on the deep dive. This is a small gun. It's a relatively simple firearm. There's not a lot to go into it in that regard. It really has this historical place within Smith and Wesson, and then within firearm history in general. I think just about every time you look at a top 10 or Smith and Wesson's most famous or influential firearms, and of course those are two different things, famous and influential, but it's always in that top 10, obviously, right? Because it just became, like I said, this iconic firearm, and what the masses wanted in a small, concealable, but in a decent cartridge, the 38 Special. And again, I'm not a huge fan of 38 Special, but in a plus P in today's high-tech ammunition, that is an acceptable cartridge for me, in my opinion, for self-defense. So again, I'm comfortable putting this into a pocket. And I didn't have it with me today, but I generally put it into a leather Don Hume holster. I like leather, so that works really well for me. It has the hook on the holster, so it plants well into your pocket, and then you can draw out clean and easy. I'm not a huge fan of pocket carry in general, but again, for the use of this firearm the way I use it, again, typically just grabbing it and taking the dog out at night or the middle of the night, or someone's unexpectedly in the front yard or driveway or something like that, and you just want to have a firearm tucked away in your pocket. That's kind of when I kind of utilize this. And some of the other holsters are good too. I know there's some really nice pocket holsters that are like a nylon or have kind of a stickier material on the outside, so when you slip those into your pocket, they don't move at all, and the firearm is easily drawn. But so again, hopefully I didn't forget to tell you anything or miss anything. Smith and Wesson, Chief Special, Model 36. We'll talk about some of the other models. Like I said, we'll do another series. This will be a series of videos that we'll do over the next several weeks, and we'll build on that throughout. The one thing I did want to mention, I know I had noted in that initial snub nose video that I had mentioned that I had gone ahead and shot this and the other 3 snubs that I had at the time side by side, all 4. And I was curious also which one I preferred and liked. And my conclusion was, first of all, I like steel frame guns. I have the air weights, right, like the air weight bodyguard. And again, there's a positive to that. You've got an alloy frame. It's much lighter. You don't even notice it's there. But I do enjoy shooting the steel frame guns better. And of the four, and I'm not just saying that because we have the Chief Special out here, the 36, but this was for me the nicest gun to shoot, and I was the most accurate with it, and it just fit my hand and did everything I wanted it to do. It was interesting. I didn't really know myself how that result was going to come out. And I'll talk about the other ones because as we do the other videos, I'll tell you a little bit about my experiences with those. Many of those, or some of those, have the newer, I guess if you will, rubber grips that do provide an advantage. Again, we had already talked about it. These small little, round butt grips. There's not a lot here to hold on to, but again, it's concealable. You'll see the Tyler, I believe it is, grip adapters. Even though we refer to these as stocks, the grip adapters, which certainly aid in that. And of course, that's probably also why the rubber grips became so popular, because not only do you have just a different material to kind of grip and hold on to, but the rubber grips basically kind of incorporated that grip adapter into there. And I do like them. I'm not saying I don't like the rubber grips. I really do. They are better. I mean, strictly from a practical standpoint, they are. But honestly, I find them kind of ugly, and there's just such an elegance with the walnut wood against the Smith and Wesson bluing, and just on this. This is an original stock with this gun, so it just has to be this way for me. I'm not gonna put an ugly set of rubber grips on here. I can do that with something like a 442 or something like that. So, but anyways, I hope you guys really liked it. Would love to hear some comments. I know we've got snub-nosed revolver fans out there. You probably have your own stories. I'm sure many of you know more about it than I do, or have different experiences over the decades than I do. So we'd really like to hear the comments. Again, hopefully I didn't miss anything. And thanks again for taking some time and spending some time with us. And we'll see you next time on The Daily Defender.